Greetings gastronauts, this is Keefcooks, I'm Keith, and today I'm going to show you a British classic from the East End of London, pie, mash and liqueur. So I'm doing this for George Hughes, who requested it way back in July, and at the time I said I wouldn't do it then because I've never actually had East End pie, mash and liqueur, and I wanted to try it in situ just to see what it's like, because frankly it strikes me as a little bit weird. But I haven't managed to, and I do actually fancy having a go, and I really feel like a pie. So when I say it's a bit weird, it's because the liquor, which is nothing to do with alcohol, it's the liquid that eels were cooked in. So this is your original London street food. It used to be sold from barrows and stuff down dodgy alleys. And the filling traditionally was eels, because the River Thames was full of them. It's not now, and neither are these pies. These days that minced beef is the most typical, although other fillings are available. So they would chop up the eels and boil them up in water, which gave you a very fishy stock. And the eels went in the pies, the stock was thickened up and a load of parsley added, and that was served over the top as a sauce. So it's like a fishy parsley sauce, but with a meat pie. If that doesn't strike you as strange, I don't know what does. Anyway, I'm sure it'll be fab, so let's do it. Right, first thing to do is make the minced beef filling. So I've got 500 grams of minced beef, a large onion, half a litre of beef stock, a teaspoon of ground black pepper and a teaspoon of chopped parsley. You'll also need a bit of corn flour and water later on to thicken it up. So we need to peel and chop the onion. Possibly sharpen the knife. Oh yeah, that's better. There are a few things more dangerous than blunt knives, chefs like to say. So slice your onion, chop it into bits. I've got some oil heating on medium heat, and you want to throw in the onions and cook them for 5 to 10 minutes till they're soft and a bit browned. That's just about ready, so we'll add the minced beef. Just break that up and let it cook till it all gets a bit browned. Okay, that's looking good, so we'll add the stock. Turn down the heat. Add the pepper and the parsley. And then we'll just let this simmer for about 20 minutes. Keep an eye on it in case it dries out and needs more liquid. Okay, that's looking good. And I forgot one fairly important thing, which is a splash of Worcester sauce. Unless you live in Yorkshire, in which case you patriotically use Henderson's relish, which is much better. There we go, big splash. Give it a stir, and now we want to thicken up the gravy. So I've mixed about equal quantities of corn flour and cold water. I'm just using part of that. I'll use the rest of it to thicken up the liquor at the end. And just stir that in and let it cook for a few minutes, and your gravy should thicken up nicely. The reason for mixing the corn flour with water is so that you don't get lumps when you chuck the flour into the hot liquid. And we'll have a little taste. That's nice. Well, that's done. Turn it off the heat, let it cool down completely, because you don't want to be putting hot pie filling into a pastry case or you'll get a soggy bottom. Now, there's a very strange thing about these East End pies is that they are made of two different kinds of pastry. The bottom is a suet-based pastry, such as you would use in a steak kidney pudding, and so it needs to be steamed. And the top is a short crust pastry, like you'd use normally in a pie. And some recipes also suggest flaky pastry. You know, flaky or puff pastry on a pie, to me, is an abomination. Anyway, I can't imagine Claude Dibbler's street food emporium going to the trouble of making two types of pastry. I really can't, and I'm not convinced that real pie shops do that either. Anyway, that's what all the recipes on the interwebs say to do. So I've got 300 grams of self-raising flour, 150 grams of suet, and a splash of water, enough to bring them together, that's all. And for the top pastry, I've got 150 grams of plain all-purpose flour, 75 grams of cold butter, and a pinch of salt, and again, enough water to bring it together. And if you're baffled by the mention of suet, it's a hard fat that is found around the kidneys of beasties, and in the UK and other places it's sold shredded, and it's kind of coated in flour. Right, we'll just make up the pastry for the bottoms first. So stir together the self-raising flour and the suet, and then add water a bit at a time until you've got just enough in there. Okay, that's about right. So now I'm going to cover that with plastic film and let it rest for a bit. To make the short crust pastry, you want half a teaspoon of salt in there, and then get your butter. I've chopped this into little bits and just squeeze them in and rub them into the flour with your fingertips. The idea is to try and keep this cool so you don't actually melt the butter. And that should end up looking like fine breadcrumbs. Alright, that looks a bit crummy to me, so now a bit of water and a bit of a stir. And that might actually have been a bit too much water, so maybe I'll just pop in a bit more flour. Okay, now that's too much flour. Anyway, we can deal with that. Right, cover that with plastic film and let it rest. Now we can start putting the pies together. So I'm using these pie dishes. If you haven't got anything like that, you can use foil things. And I'm using this bowl to cut the tops with, because it's the same diameter. Okay, so you want flour on your worktop. You want a rolling pin, and just roll it out to about 3 or 4 millimeters thick, about 1/4 of an inch, bit less. And then just use your cutter to cut out the lids. So I reckon I've got enough pastry and filling to do 6 pies. And I'm just going to use the end of a funnel to make a hole in the middle of each one to let steam escape. So I'll just sprinkle a bit more flour on these so that I can stack them up on a plate without them sticking to each other. Now you need to prep your tins just by buttering the inside of each one. So here's the suet pastry for the bottoms, and you can feel the lumps of suet in there. It's kind of weird. And we'll just roll that quite thinly. It's pretty hard stuff to deal with, actually. So I'll just take a bit of that and see if we can get them in the tin. I can't wait to find out what these turn out like. They'll either be wonderful or a disaster. I'll trim off the excess. So there we go, half a dozen bases and a bit of suet pastry left over. And you know what, I think I could make those into dumplings. So I'll keep that and try that later. Now at this point you want to turn your oven on to preheat it to 160 degrees Celsius if it's a fan oven, or 180 if it isn't. And now I've got my 6 pie bottoms, so pop filling into each one, and look at that. I reckon I've got enough left over for one more pie there, so maybe later. Now you want to moisten the edge, or moisten the rim of each base, and pop a lid on it. Press it down all around, and then just kind of raise up the edge a bit so it's not sticking on the rim. Now the last thing to do before we bake them is glaze the tops with some beaten egg. So to make the liquor, I've got almost half a litre of fish stock, cheating, made from a cube, a good handful of fresh parsley, and the remains of the flour and water, or the corn flour and water mix from earlier. Also secret or magic ingredient, chili vinegar. Now I can't imagine this being used in Victorian times, but apparently it's traditional. And the fish stock, cheating obviously, if you've got an eel, You could chop it into big chunks and boil it up in water with maybe an onion, some celery and a carrot. I've got to chop that parsley reet fine. And I always use flat leaf parsley. I can't be doing with this curly leaf stuff you get in England. It's I just don't see the point really. It doesn't seem to taste of anything much. So I've got the fish stock coming to the boil. I'm going to add the chopped parsley. Okay, now I'll add some of the corn flour and water to thicken it. Okay, so now we've got a bright green thickish liquid, and I'm going to pop in some of this chili vinegar. I made this yesterday. It's just malt vinegar with 3 chilies chopped up in it and left to marinate. And I've seen recipes where they say you don't do this, you don't put the chili vinegar in the liquor, you add it afterwards. But I think I'll probably do both. Ooh, wow. That is very interesting. Parsley, vinegar, bit of chili. Well, time to cook the pies, and this is a bit of a problem because the biggest thing I've got that's suitable to put hot water in and bake the pies in will only hold 2 pies. So anyway, I will cook 2 pies. So I've got some hot water, and that needs to come to about halfway up the pies. And then wrap that tightly in foil. And I'll stick that in the oven for about 25 minutes and then have a look at it. So for the mash, I've got a load of potatoes, obviously, and they need to be peeled. You'll also need, to finish them off, some milk, a knob of butter and some salt, and cut them into bits. So the smaller your bits, the quicker they'll cook. And now I've got a pan of water coming to the boil with a teaspoon of salt in it, and we'll pop these in and let them cook for about 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, pies have had 25 minutes, so let's have a little look. Oh, they're starting to look pretty good. Not very browned on the top, so I think I'll give them another 10 minutes. Okay, the spuddies are cooked, so I'm going to add a pinch of salt, a splash of milk, some butter, and get the old masher and mash them. If you've seen me do mashed potatoes before, you probably know one of my pet hates is potato mashed or pureed in a food processor that ain't mashed potato. That's glue. There we go. Lovely mash, I think. Taste it. Yep, that'll do me. So just I'll just stick a lid on that and keep it warm till the pies are ready. As I suspected, an extra 10 minutes hasn't actually made any difference to the top. It is not cooked. So I'm just going to put that uncovered back in the oven, and I'll maybe put the grill broiler on to get some colour on the top. I'm sure the bottom is cooked and lovely. You know, I've seen videos of pie shops in London, and the tops of their pies are always scorched and nasty looking, and I think that's because they put it under a very hot grill to finish it off. I could be wrong. So there it is, looking reasonably good, and the deal is you pour this liquor all over it, well, over the spuds, and then you eat it. Oh, but don't forget chili vinegar. Okay, moment of truth. Let's have some of this lovely pie. It's definitely more like a pudding, a steak and kidney pudding kind of thing than a pie, because of the suet base, but lovely nonetheless. Now let's try some mash and some of this liquor. That's good. Right, I'm off to London to get some more of this, mate. Core, blimey, trousers. Okay, enjoy. And that's that. I hope you enjoyed it. Now you can get the full recipe on my website, keefcooks.com, and there should be a link kicking around on the screen over there or down there. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my channel. Link. And talk to me. Leave comments, make requests, keep it civil and friendly or I will ban you. And thanks for watching, and see you next time.